you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. I wasn't the kind of person who believed in energy healing or chakra alignment or any of that vibrationary stuff, but back then, I was broken. I just lost my job, my relationship was imploding, I was drinking too much, sleeping too little. I wasn't looking for a cult, I was just looking for help, and I found it, or so I thought, in a place called the Threshold Retreat. It promised transformation, 7 days of guided meditation, detoxification, and emotional rebirth. The pictures were beautiful, cliffside yoga, campfires under the stars, smiling people in flowing robes. It looked peaceful, it looked like a reset, so I paid a deposit and packed light. It was deep in the Sedona desert, remote. You had to leave your car in a gravel lot and take a shuttle the last 2 miles of a winding trail. There were no roads, no cell towers, no buildings in sight. Just red rock, dry air, and heat that made your skin feel thin. At the top of the trail, there was a wooden archway with a painted sign. The threshold is not a place, it's a moment. There were 14 of us, all strangers, all smiling a little too hard, like we were trying to convince ourselves this wasn't weird. We were given white linen robes, no phones, no watches, no outside food or drink. They said it was part of the purification. I figured, whatever, that's what I signed up for, right? It started like any other retreat. Morning yoga, cold smoothies, group breathing sessions. The leaders, who called themselves the Ascended, wore deep red robes. They spoke softly, smiled constantly. There were 5 of them, but only one really mattered. Kira. She had a presence. She didn't walk, she floated. Everyone looked to her before speaking. She would touch your shoulder when you talked, and somehow it made you want to cry. She told me I had a dark attachment in my root chakra, whatever that meant. By day 3, the food got smaller, only raw vegetables, no salt, no caffeine. They called it clarity fasting. By day 4, we weren't allowed to speak before sunrise, and by day 5, we weren't allowed to speak at all, unless asked a question. On the 6th night, they built a fire ring out in the desert. We were led out at dusk, barefoot, blindfolded. One by one, they whispered things into our ears. Let go. You are ready. Pain purifies. Then they made us kneel around the fire. Kira walked the circle, holding a bowl. She scooped black ash from the flames and smeared it across our foreheads. Then she asked questions, one by one, about our shame, our secrets, our sins, and if we didn't answer, we didn't eat the next morning. Someone cried, someone tried to leave. Kira smiled and said, the doors are only open once you've been reborn. There were no doors, of course, no fences, but we were miles from anything. No phones, no bags, no clue where we were. That night, a woman named Jamie didn't show up to the fire circle. Kira said she had transcended early. Everyone nodded. And the next day, a guy named Rowan started asking questions. Where's Jamie? Why haven't we seen her? Why is the food getting smaller? They gave him extra attention that night. Bree, ascended, came to his tent. We heard whispers, then shouting, then silence. Rowan wasn't at breakfast. They said he left, but his robe was still in his tent. I was done. I knew something was wrong. This wasn't spiritual healing. It was psychological abuse. So I waited until lights out. I crept out of my tent and went looking for supplies. In the supply hut, I found a stack of driving licenses and phones, all hidden in a plastic tub beneath a blanket. Mine was there too, along with Jamie's and Rowan's. Then I heard movement behind me. I ducked, peered through the cracks. It was Kira. She wasn't smiling anymore. She was watching me. I held my breath. She walked past and I ran. I didn't make it out. They caught me just before I reached the tree line, dragged me back barefoot, threw me in a locked tent, a storage one with no windows. The next night was the final ceremony. They told me I'd been resisting, that I needed to be cut free from my earthly bindings. They tied me to a stake in the desert, real ropes, hands bound behind me. The fire was bigger now. Everyone else was in a circle, chanting. And Kira, she held a blade, flat, rusted, used for herbs, she said, but that wasn't why she brought it. She raised it and I started screaming, begging. I told them I saw the IDs, I knew what they were doing. That's when I heard it. A voice shouting from the ridge, headlights flashing. "This is the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department, stay where you are." Turns out Rowan had escaped. He flagged down a truck and led officers back the next night. The threshold was shut down. The leaders were arrested, including Kira. But she smiled the whole time, even in cuffs, even in court. A year later, I was back in my hometown. New job, new life. One day I found a flyer tucked under my windshield. A wellness retreat. Different name, different colours, but I recognised the font. And the photo, it was Kira, still smiling. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But I don't go to retreats anymore. I don't meditate, and I don't trust people who smile too much. Because healing is real, but so is hell in disguise. If you made it this far, maybe you're not like the others. Hit subscribe and I'll keep the stories coming. I used to think all churches were like ours. That's the trick with cults. When you grow up inside one, you don't know it's a cult. You just think it's life. Until one day you get out and realise the world is nothing like what they told you. I was born into a group called the Assembly of Divine Mercy in rural Missouri. We didn't call it a cult, we called it the Fold. Our compound sat around 50 miles outside of Springfield. No cell service, no internet. One road in, no road signs out. There were maybe 120 of us at that time. All families, all living in prefab homes built around the tabernacle, a big, windowless white building at the centre of everything. That was where he spoke. We didn't call him by name, only the shepherd. He never gave sermons, not in the normal sense. He just whispered. He'd walk around us during service, place a hand on your shoulder and whisper into your ear, "You're impure. You've pleased the Lord. Your mother's watching you from above." No one questioned him, not once. If he touched you, you bowed your head. If he looked at you, you lowered your eyes. He didn't eat with us, he didn't sleep in the compound. He lived in the watchtower, a tall cabin at the back of the woods. We weren't allowed near it, ever. We were homeschooled. The lessons were mostly scripture. His vision, his version, not any Bible you've ever read. Girls were taught to speak softly, obey quickly, and cover their bodies. Boys were taught to build, farm, and watch for outsiders. We were told the outside world was Sodom, full of sin, disease, and corruption. If we left the fold, we'd rot inside. That's how they said it. Your blood will sour, your lungs will blacken, your eyes will no longer see the light. And I believed them, until my brother didn't. Ezra was 2 years older, smart, quiet, too smart really. He started asking questions around age 13. Why weren't we allowed to read real books? Why did the shepherd never show up in daylight? Why were there so many new babies and so few new men? The questions got him in trouble. They took him to the tabernacle for cleansing. He came back, wrong, empty, wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat with us. Then he disappeared. They told us he'd ascended, but I saw them burning his clothes behind the watchtower. At 14, I started sneaking out at night. I just needed air, space, anything. One night, I saw one of the elders dragging something behind the tabernacle, a cart covered in tarp. I followed at a distance. He pushed it into a hidden side door. I had never seen that door before. The next night, I came back alone. It was locked, but the key was still in the dirt, hidden under a stone. Inside was a staircase, and below, a room. It wasn't for prayer, it was for punishment. Chains on the walls, stained sheets, a camera mounted in the corner, and in the back, a filing cabinet. Inside were folders, names, photos. Anna J, discipline level 4. Marcus H, removed. Ezri R, converted, deceased. I wanted to scream, but I heard a voice above me. "Why you down there, boy?" It wasn't the shepherd, it was the elder, Mr. Grant. He had a flashlight and a gun. I ran. I took a back stairwell through the pantry and climbed into the woods. I knew if they caught me, they would make me ascend too. I ran until I collapsed near a logging road. A trucker found me the next morning, naked, covered in cuts, barely breathing. I spent the next year in state care. No one believed me at first, but once I gave them the location and showed them the maps I'd drawn of the compound, they acted, or tried to. When investigators arrived, the fold was gone. Every home burned to the ground. The tabernacle, ash. The watchtower, collapsed. No bodies, no sign of struggle. Just a single phase spray painted on a rock at the site. We are watching. We always watch. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it, but sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I swear I hear a whisper in my ear, "Your blood will sour." I wasn't looking for anything serious, just some honest work, manual labour, decent pay, nothing corporate. I've been bouncing around Northern California for months, working roadside gigs, helping on weed farms, stuff like that. So when I found a flyer in Arcata for a living landscaping job, I figured it was perfect. Room, board, weekly pay, remote location. Just a nice family needing help fixing up their rural property. At least, that's what they said. I met them at a diner in Eureka. The mother's name was Clara, mid-50s, wore a shawl and called everyone dear. The father was Mark, soft-spoken, beard like an old-school preacher. And then there was Kyle, their son, maybe late 20s, quiet, eyes too wide, never blinked when he smiled. They said they had a ranch an hour outside of town. They needed help clearing bushes, digging irrigation lines, prepping for winter. They offered me $700 a week, cash. No paperwork, no ID needed, just trust. I was broke, so I said yes. It was deeper than I expected, a good 90 minutes off grid. No address, just a hand-drawn map. The road turned to gravel, then dirt. Eventually we reached a clearing surrounded by redwoods so thick they blocked the sky. Their house was a simple 2-story farmhouse. Next to it, a barn, a woodshed, and a separate stone building with a steel door. They didn't tell me what that was. They didn't need to. It seemed normal enough. We cut branches, hauled wood, dug trenches. But after dinner, they'd all disappear into the barn together. Kyle would light candles, Mark would chant slowly. I could hear it through the cracks. Low words, repeated phrases. It sounded like Latin, or something trying to be Latin. When I asked Clara about it, she said, "We give thanks before we sleep. You're welcome to join when you're ready." I said no thanks. The next morning, my boots were missing. They turned up in the shed, soaking wet. One day, Mark asked me to help Kyle with foundation work, where there was a sloped hatch door leading underground. We climbed down a steep ladder into what looked like a root cellar, but there wasn't storage. It was a construction site. Bare walls, dirt floor, flickering lamps strung overhead. Kyle handed me a shovel. "We're expanding," he said. "Preparing for the collapse." I didn't ask what that meant. We dug all day. No break, no talking. And over the next week, we just kept digging. Passages split off, some led nowhere. One led to a narrow chamber with rows of cots and chains on the floor. Kyle said nothing. I asked no questions, but every night I heard them chanting again, longer, louder, and sometimes I swear I could hear someone else down there, someone not part of the family. On the 9th day, I woke up to find my door locked from the outside. No explanation, just silence. And that night, they unlocked it and said nothing. The next morning, I refused to go back underground. Clara smiled and said, "That's okay, dear. You've already done your part." Kyle took my tools away. Mark watched me all day from the porch. At night, I snuck into the tunnel while they were in the barn. I followed a side path I hadn't seen before. It led to a door, steel, heavy, with no handle, but it was cracked open. Inside was a stone room, no lights, just a small trapdoor in the floor, and around it, symbols drawn in chalk, bones laid in circles, and a pile of clothes. Not theirs, mine. I turned around and there was Clara. Smiling, she said softly, "It's not about you, it's what you represent." I ran, bolted up the stairs through the clearing into the woods. They didn't chase me, not then, but I heard chanting behind me as I ran, not in English, not in any language I've ever heard before. I ran for hours. Eventually I found a ranger station, collapsed on the porch. The authorities investigated. The farm was gone, burned, ashes, no sign of tunnels, no sign of the steel room, no trace of the family. The sheriff said the land was unoccupied, had been for years, but I still have the flyer, the one they posted in town. The same flyer appeared 6 months later in Santa Rosa. Different names, different faces, same wording. If you're hearing this, it means I survived long enough to tell it. But I don't work off grid anymore, and if someone ever asks you to help prep for the collapse, don't ask questions, just run.